Hey everyone, first and foremost, I want to welcome you guys back to the channel. Today we're talking about something that is unfortunate. I'm from New York City, and I'm pretty sure you guys heard by now about the airplane accident that took place at LaGuardia. So this one hits a little close to home for me. I'm covering it, but I want you to keep in mind that there are a lot of there's a lot of information out there that is not known to the public. So it's really important that we don't start assuming things, we don't start speculating, and that we actually take time to develop the facts. So with that said, everything that I'm discussing today has taken place prior to today's date, which is the 24th of March. A lot of the information in this video that I'm going to talk about comes from some news reports. ABC News is one of the news reports, some videos as well too. And the reason why I'm talking about it is because it sort of ties into this whole idea of liability. And I think it's an important discussion to have, not just for this situation, but just in the future, moving forward, when we're hearing about certain kinds of accidents, especially accidents that are tragic like the one at hand. So for those who don't know, I'll play a quick video. We'll discuss it in a little bit, and let's get right to it.
A Port Authority fire truck last night, crushing the nose of the aircraft. The pilot and the co-pilot were killed in this. ABC's Hannah Battah has the details.
Overnight, New York's LaGuardia Airport closed after an Air Canada Express flight collided with a fire truck on the tarmac.
There's probably 200 police officers and emergency response vehicles, and that plane is suspended on top of a vehicle.
41 passengers and crew were transported to the hospital, as well as the ARF officers. Sadly, the two pilots are confirmed deceased.
Stop truck one. Stop. Stop truck one. Stop.
Air traffic data shows Air Canada flight 8646 from Montreal landed at LaGuardia at 11:40 p.m. Sometime shortly after touching down, the plane collided nose first with a fire truck. Images show the plane's nose destroyed. The entire plane tilted up into the air. LaGuardia closing down immediately. The FAA issuing a ground stop for all planes headed to the airport. Air traffic controllers scrambling to divert other planes.
LaGuardia Airport is closed at this time. No aircraft in or out.
Moments before the incident, the truck could be heard asking controllers for permission to cross a runway. A controller apparently giving permission.
Truck one and company in LaGuardia Tower requesting to cross port at Delta.
One company cross Port Delta.
Truck one and company crossing port at Delta.
A controller later saying this to another pilot.
We're dealing with an emergency over here.
So as you can see from the video, from the news reporting, it's a pretty big deal. I think the last time there was an accident involving a New York airport was about 34 years ago. And the situation is there for a number of reasons, right? I mean, the incident took place fairly recent, and there is this huge assumption, at least on social media, from what I could see, TikTok, Instagram, etc., where people are quick to judge and blame. And I'm not saying that they're wrong. What I am saying is to be a little cautious in judging at first, because as we've seen with many investigations, especially investigations conducted by the government, these things take time, and we always learn some new fact that changes the way the story seems to be read. And with that said, one of the things you notice towards the end of the video was, and it's right there on the screen for you to read, where we were dealing with an emergency earlier, I messed up. And that right there is enough for someone to automatically assign some sort of blame. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I think it's really important that we get the facts. So here is what I know. I did a bit of research on this so far. Here's what I know. There was an Air Canada flight, 8646, and it collided with a fire truck, right, on runway 4 at LGA on March 22, 2026. Now, keep in mind, again, this video was made on March 24th. The truck was responding to a separate odor-related kind of emergency at another airplane. And the investigators say that the truck was cleared to cross before the controller then issued the urgent stop, which we heard in the video. Now, this, I'm going to put the link in the description, right? And this is coming from NBC. We know that two pilots were unfortunately unalive. We know that the fire truck was cleared to pass. We know that at 2 minutes and 22 seconds, the flight crew checked in with the tower at LGA. At 2 minutes and 17 seconds, the LGA tower cleared the airplane to land on runway 4. At 1 minute and 3 seconds, an airport vehicle made a radio transmission to the tower, but the transmissions was stepped on by another radio transmission. At 54 seconds, the flight crew was advised by the tower that the plane was in a stable condition to land. At 40 seconds, the LGA tower asked which vehicle needed to cross the runway, and, we're getting closer. At 25 seconds, the truck requested permission to cross runway 4. At 20 seconds, the fire truck got the okay. At 17 seconds, the fire truck read back the runway cross clearance. And at 9 seconds, the tower told the fire truck to stop. And at 4 seconds, the tower set to stop again. Now, you guys know what happened at that point. So you're going to see this article in the description. But something that I want to point out is within this article, they're quoting the NTSB, right? And what they're saying is that the runway at issue had a warning system that didn't sound. And that's because the fire truck lacked some kind of transponder, and the investigators are looking into that. And I'm not saying the fire department is at fault for this. I'm not saying that the air traffic controller didn't do their job properly. I'm just saying that there's a lot of moving pieces and that we really need to understand what happened before we're quick to point the finger at someone. So with that said, I want to briefly see this interview that was taking place with one of the passengers that was on a plane, and just get his perspective, just so that we can see from his eyes, from his mouth, to what he experienced. His name is Jack Cobo.
We came in pretty hard. We immediately hit something, and it was just chaos from there. About 5 seconds later, we had come to a stop. But in that short period, everybody was hunkered down and everybody was screaming. Pretty quickly, we didn't have any directions because the pilot's cabin had been kind of destroyed. So somebody said, "Let's get the emergency exit and get the door, and let's all jump out." And that's exactly what.
So we could just see right now from his experience, from where he was sitting. I believe he was sitting in seat number 18. We're going to want to know everyone who was able to see what was taking place, like outside of the window, who can see any kind of phones, cameras, because everyone on the plane are also witnesses to the event that took place. They were directly involved in it, albeit they may not be able to see what took place outside of the plane directly in front of them. To some extent, they may be able to see things that might have been happening on the way down. Usually, when we're flying, people tend to take their phone out by the windows and start taking videos of what the ground looks like, especially when they're coming from New York City. Now, this plane was coming from Canada, of course. But all of these things matter in terms of us making sure that we have the proper picture to see. And that's kind of what the whole point of this is just to make sure that we have all the facts fleshed out before we're quick to judge. And oftentimes we are quick to judge, and rightfully so, we're right? We may say, well, such and such is liable for what happened, right? It's clear as day, but it's better to get it right. It's better to do the investigation to make sure that we get to the right answer. And we also do, like, you remember in middle school or elementary school, when you did your homework, your teacher would say, show your work. And that's kind of what we want to happen here. Now, this next person, right, she was also on a plane, and she recounts like her experience as well too. And we also learned some new facts that could help out in terms of just understanding how this whole thing unfolded.
Rebecca LaGuardia. Rebecca, thank you so much. I just cannot even imagine. So I will just ask you to describe what those moments were like.
Now, just for a quick background, Rebecca is actually a former News 12, I believe, anchor or reporter with this station. So
right before the crash, as we were descending, the flight attendant said something very eerie that I normally have never heard before landing. She said, in case of an emergency landing, do not grab your luggage. And everybody was like, okay. And then as we were descending, we hit a lot of turbulence. So she said, please, everyone, the pilot is saying for everyone to keep your seatbelts on. We're hitting a lot of turbulence. And then we landed very roughly. It was a rough landing. Like when we landed, everyone felt it. It just like the plane like jolted, and you heard the pilot try to brake, like he was trying to prevent the collision that occurred. And as you heard the brake, you just, a couple seconds later, it was just a very loud boom, and everybody just jolted out of their seats. People hit their heads. People were bleeding. I was sitting in the emergency row and I was right next to the emergency exit, but I was waiting for guidance from like flight crew, but that didn't happen because they were in the front of the plane. And as you know, the front of the plane was extremely damaged. I didn't realize that. So I'm asking everyone around me if they're okay. And then one of the passengers screamed to me like, please open the exit door. And I was like, of course. So we opened the exit door and there was no slide for us. A lot of people slid off of the wing of the plane getting out. And then by the time I got out, there was emergency personnel and someone was able to assist me sliding off of the wing. And once we got off of the wing, they had us standing next to an emergency vehicle, and that's when we were able to see the extensive damage of the plane, on top of people just like bleeding and bumps and bruises. It was a very harrowing scene. We were all emotional and it was just very scary. It happened so quickly. But I will say everyone on the plane was helping each other. There was nobody like stampeding over anybody. Everybody collectively worked together to get out of the plane. And I mean, everyone is very traumatized because we know that the pilots unfortunately didn't make it and the flight attendant was seriously injured in addition to the firemen in the truck. So it was just a very scary scene, and it was a long night because our flight kept getting delayed for different reasons. We were supposed to depart at 8:30, and then.
So with that said, that's kind of what we want in these catastrophic situations, is that we could all come together and help one another and not, be selfish in these kind of moments. And that's what it sounded like the people in the plane. So I just want to congratulate them. But I think the real question here is, why are we talking about this, right? Like, why are we talking about this accident that took place 2 days ago? For a number of reasons, right? Like, obviously, there's this idea that someone is responsible for what happened. And typically in these situations, and generally speaking, in most states, you would analyze a situation under some sort of kind of negligence analysis, right? Like, you would think, was there a duty, right? Was there a breach of a duty, right? Is there causation? Is there damages? What we do know is that presumably, right, people on a plane are entitled to have a safe landing, right? There's expectation that the person that is bringing you somewhere will take some duty of care to land the plane safely. There's this duty that is likely imposed on an air traffic controller to do their job well enough to ensure that you get to land safely, right? And was there a breach of that duty? I mean, clearly there's an accident, so something went wrong along those lines, and we're gonna have to understand what kind of standard are imposed on the pilot or the air traffic controller. And usually, when you have some kind of profession like that requires a specific kind of license, either get an attorney or a pilot or even an air traffic controller who probably has to do some kind of certification, you're usually judged based off how would another reasonable pilot act in a situation, how would another reasonable air traffic controller act in a situation. All of these things come into play. We know that there are some sort of damages, some sort of harm, because as we heard in the video, when the plane landed, people were bleeding, right? And some people went to the hospital, and there's likely going to be some sort of either soft tissue injury or fractures, or, at the worst case, some possible surgeries. But we do know that there is some sort of harm. We know that there is a cause, but we need to determine the cause. And that's where the analysis gets interesting. Again, it's easy to say that, hey, the air traffic controller said, I messed up. Let's book him. He's the person that did it. And he might have made a mistake. He probably was negligent in this matter. But we'll need to know all the facts surrounding the situation before we point the finger. Again, the NTSB report, according to ABC News or the NBC, you'll see the article in the description, notes that there was some failure on the runway having to do with the fire department. And that doesn't mean that, the air traffic controller didn't mess up. It just means that he probably wasn't the only factor in bringing about the accident. And so I'm saying all this to say that there's still open questions, right? There's open questions such as like, whether fatigue played a role into this. We all know about the current situation right now with the federal government is shut down, and that there's a lack of air traffic controllers right now in our nation. And this thing is seriously hurting things. You can imagine if people aren't getting paid, it's they're less likely to do the work well. And being an air traffic controller, I have to say, and I'm just speaking from what I can imagine, it's a high demanding job, right? And the risks are high, as we can see here. The risk is super high. So you're juggling so many things, and I have to ask, right? And this is my question that I'm proposing to you, the viewer. We can blame the FDNY, the Port Authority who operates LaGuardia, the federal government, the air traffic controller. But what about the system that's in place, right? The system that is in place. It's not news to us that air traffic controllers have a high demanding job, right? It's not news to us that there's been accidents in the past. I mean, roughly a year or almost 2 years ago, there was another plane crash that took place in DC. And that also had to do with air traffic controller and plane and helicopter and a plane, etc., and communication. And LGA is placed in a very, very busy airspace that has a lot of traffic. I think there's at least 5 airports in New York, right, operating. So it's very stressful, and I don't know if there needs to be a reduction in the amount of flights that go out at a certain time throughout the day to allow the air traffic controller to have more time to make a better analysis on how they advise the plane whether to land or not. I'm not sure what kind of safety measures really need to be in place. But I think something does need to change, and I'm curious to know your thoughts in the comments about what do you think about this. If you're an air traffic controller out there, please, chime in. Let me know if I got something wrong or right. I really want to understand the situation. Obviously, I'm not in aviation, but I can tell you from an attorney standpoint that when I'm looking at the situation, I know that someone will be held responsible and that there's going to need to be more facts in order to make sure that we get the right person and hold them liable for this. The whole idea is, could this have been prevented? And it's easy to say, well, the air traffic controller he should have paid attention. We know that he told the fire department truck to stop, but the accident still took place. And I'm just wondering should we assign blame, liability to one person, or should it be involved with more people, like an entity, like the government or the system? And that's what I'm curious about. So I'm really interested to know your thoughts. Again, this was a very unfortunate situation, and my thoughts and prayers are with the family, the pilots, and the people who were injured in this accident. So it could have been a lot worse. I'm not saying this is a good situation. Just the timing of everything, having a plane land and a fire truck cutting across the runway and possibly hitting the middle of the airplane where most of the fuel is kept, it could have been a tragic situation. And I'm just thank God that it's not as worse as it could have been. But that's enough rambling for me. But let me know your thoughts and comments, your thoughts in the comment section. And again, if you're an air traffic controller out there, please let me know your thoughts. I'm really curious to hear. All right, everyone, have a good one.